The morning sun crept slowly over the eastern hills, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. High Meadow was waking up to another peaceful day. This small town, nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling farmland, was home to about 3,000 souls. Everyone knew everyone here. People greeted each other by name on the street. Life moved at a gentle pace, far removed from the chaos of big cities. Lorraine Baker stood behind the counter of her small shop, arranging fresh vegetables in wooden crates. At 67 years old, she moved with a certain grace that came from years of discipline and care for her health. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her blue eyes held a kindness that made customers feel welcome the moment they walked through the door. "Good morning, Lorraine," called out Mrs. Henderson, pushing open the glass door with her usual cheerful energy. She was one of the first customers every Tuesday morning, regular as clockwork. "Good morning, Margaret," Lorraine replied with a warm smile. "The tomatoes are especially good today. Just came in from Johnson's farm this morning." Margaret Henderson made her way to the produce section, her shopping basket swinging from her arm. "Oh, wonderful! I'm making my special pasta sauce tonight. Robert's daughter is coming for dinner." Lorraine nodded, carefully wrapping some tomatoes in brown paper. "How lovely! Please give them my regards." This was Lorraine's life now. Simple conversations about vegetables and weather, familiar faces and predictable routines. She had owned Baker's Fresh Produce for 10 years, and in that time, she had become a beloved fixture in High Meadow. People trusted her recommendations, appreciated her fair prices, and enjoyed her gentle manner. The shop itself was modest, but well kept. Wooden shelves lined the walls, holding jars of local honey, homemade jams, and fresh eggs from nearby farms. The front windows let in plenty of natural light, which made the colorful fruits and vegetables look even more appealing. A small hand-painted sign above the door read, "Baker's Fresh Produce, Quality and Care Since 2015. As the morning progressed, more customers filtered in. Old Mr. Chen needed potatoes for his famous dumplings. Young Sarah Mitchell bought apples for her grandmother. The Robbins family stocked up on salad ingredients for their weekly gathering. Lorraine greeted each person warmly, asked about their families, and offered gentle advice on selecting the best produce. "How's your knee doing, George?" she asked Mr. Peterson, who had been recovering from a fall. "Much better, thanks for asking," he replied, leaning less heavily on his cane than he had the previous week. "Your recommendation about those anti-inflammatory foods really helped. The turmeric and ginger made a difference." Lorraine smiled. "I'm glad to hear it. Keep taking care of yourself." Nobody in High Meadow knew much about Lorraine's life before she came to town. She had appeared one autumn day 10 years ago, purchased the old grocery store that had been sitting empty, and transformed it into the thriving little shop it was today. When people asked about her past, she would smile politely and give vague answers about wanting a quieter life. Most folks respected her privacy. In a small town, everyone had a right to their own story. What they did know was that Lorraine was reliable, kind, and generous. When the community center needed donations for the winter food drive, she contributed without hesitation. When young families struggled to make ends meet, she quietly lowered prices or added extra items to their bags. During the harsh winter 3 years ago, she had kept the shop open despite the snow, ensuring that elderly residents could get fresh food without traveling to the next town. "You're a blessing to this community," Pastor Williams had told her once, and many people echoed that sentiment. Lorraine always deflected such praise. "I'm just doing my part," she would say. Deep down, though, she felt grateful for the acceptance she had found here. High Meadow had become her sanctuary, a place where she could heal from wounds that nobody could see. As noon approached, the shop grew quieter. Lorraine used the lull to restock shelves and update her order list for the next delivery from local farms. She took pride in supporting other small businesses in the area. The Johnsons grew the best tomatoes and peppers. The Kowalski family had a wonderful apple orchard. Pete Martinez raised organic lettuce and herbs in his greenhouse. These partnerships meant fresh, quality produce for her customers and steady income for local farmers. Lorraine was writing notes about next week's order when the phone rang. She picked up the old rotary phone that she insisted on keeping despite everyone telling her to upgrade. Baker's Fresh Produce. This is Lorraine speaking. Hi, Lorraine. It's Judy from the library. The voice on the other end was bright and friendly. I wanted to remind you about the book club meeting tomorrow evening. We're discussing The Secret Garden. Will you be able to make it? I wouldn't miss it, Lorraine assured her. I just finished rereading it last night. Such a beautiful story about healing and growth. Perfect. See you at 7. Oh, and could you bring some of those delicious pears? They were such a hit last time. Of course, I'll bring plenty. After hanging up, Lorraine smiled to herself. The book club was one of her favorite activities. Once a month, a group of women from town gathered at the library to discuss literature, share stories, and enjoy each other's company. It was one of the ways Lorraine had built connections in High Meadow, though she was always careful not to reveal too much about herself. The afternoon brought another steady stream of customers. Teenagers stopped by after school for snacks. Working parents picked up ingredients for dinner. Retirees came in for their weekly shopping. Lorraine knew all their names, remembered their preferences, and always had a kind word for everyone. Around 4 o'clock, little Emma Rodriguez came in with her grandmother, Maria. Emma was 6 years old, with dark curly hair and bright eyes full of curiosity. She loved coming to the shop because Lorraine always let her pick out a piece of fruit as a treat. Hello, Emma, Lorraine said warmly. How was school today? Good. We learned about butterflies, Emma replied excitedly. Did you know they taste with their feet? Lorraine laughed softly. I did know that. Nature is full of wonderful surprises, isn't it? While Maria selected vegetables for the week, Emma explored the shop, carefully examining each fruit and vegetable. She finally chose a perfectly ripe peach, holding it up triumphantly. Excellent choice, Lorraine approved, wrapping the peach in a napkin and handing it to the delighted child. These simple moments filled Lorraine's days. They were ordinary, unremarkable, and absolutely precious to her. After so many years of stress, danger, and responsibility, this quiet life felt like a gift. She could breathe easily here. She could sleep through the night without nightmares. Well, most nights anyway. As closing time approached, Lorraine began her end-of-day routine. She covered the produce that would stay fresh overnight, swept the floor, and counted the day's receipts. The shop had done well. Not enough to make her rich, but enough to pay the bills and set aside a little savings. She had always been careful with money, a habit from her earlier life that served her well. After locking the front door and turning off most of the lights, Lorraine climbed the narrow staircase to her apartment above the shop. It was a small, cozy space with one bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living area. The walls were painted in soft cream colors, and she had decorated simply with a few plants, comfortable furniture, and bookshelves filled with her favorite novels. Lorraine prepared a simple dinner, grilled chicken with roasted vegetables and a small salad. She ate at her kitchen table while reading a magazine about sustainable farming practices. After dinner, she washed the dishes, changed into comfortable clothes, and settled into her favorite armchair with a cup of chamomile tea. The evening light filtered through her windows, casting a gentle glow across the room. Lorraine looked around her modest home and felt a wave of contentment. This was enough. This was safe. This was home. But as she sat there in the quiet, a familiar unease crept into her mind. It happened sometimes, especially in the evening when the day's distractions faded away. Memories would surface unbidden, carrying with them the weight of a past she had tried so hard to leave behind. She closed her eyes and took slow, deep breaths. "You're safe," she whispered to herself. "You're in High Meadow. That's all behind you now." It was a mantra she had repeated countless times over the past 10 years. Some days it worked better than others. Tonight, the memories were persistent, but she had learned techniques to manage them. She focused on the present moment, the warmth of the tea in her hands, the softness of the chair beneath her, the sound of birds settling in for the night outside her window. Eventually, the tension eased. Lorraine opened her eyes and smiled softly at her own resilience. She had come so far. The panic attacks were less frequent now. The nightmares had diminished. She could make it through most days without being ambushed by traumatic memories. As darkness fell over High Meadow, Lorraine prepared for bed. She followed her nightly routine with the precision of someone who understood the importance of structure and self-care. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, applied moisturizer, and changed into comfortable pajamas. Before getting into bed, she stood at her window and looked out over the quiet town. The street lamps cast pools of warm light along Main Street. A few houses still had lights on, but most of the town was settling down for the night. In the distance, she could see the gentle hills that surrounded the valley, dark shapes against the starlit sky. "Thank you," Lorraine whispered to no one in particular. "Thank you for this peaceful place. Thank you for this second chance. Thank you for letting me be just Lorraine Baker, shop owner and community member, nothing more and nothing less." She climbed into bed and turned off the lamp on her nightstand. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought about tomorrow. Wednesday was farmers' market day, which meant an early start. She would need to be up by 5 to prepare the shop for the expected crowd. It would be a busy day, but a good one. Lorraine fell asleep with a smile on her face, unaware that her quiet life was about to be disrupted in ways she could never have imagined. The past she had worked so hard to leave behind was about to catch up with her, not through her own memories, but through an unexpected crisis that would force her to become someone she thought she had left behind forever. Chapter 2. Echoes of the Past. The next morning arrived with the cheerful chirping of birds outside Lorraine's window. Her alarm clock showed 5 a.m., and she rose immediately, a habit from years of military discipline that had never left her. Even in retirement from that life, her body maintained the same rhythms. After a quick shower and a simple breakfast of oatmeal and fruit, Lorraine dressed in her usual work attire: comfortable jeans, a clean cotton shirt, and sturdy shoes. She tied her hair back and descended the stairs to open the shop. Wednesday mornings required extra preparation because many customers came in before heading to work or starting their day. As she unlocked the door and began arranging displays, Lorraine's mind wandered to places she usually tried to avoid. Sometimes memories were like uninvited guests. They showed up when they pleased, regardless of whether you wanted them there. The smell of fresh herbs triggered it this morning. Rosemary and thyme, which she was bundling for sale, reminded her of something from long ago. She paused, holding the fragrant sprigs in her hands, and allowed herself a moment to remember. 25 years ago, she had been Captain Lorraine Baker of the United States Army Chemical Corps. It felt like a different lifetime, like remembering a movie she had once watched rather than her own life. But it had been her life. 18 years of service, dedication, and expertise in one of the military's most specialized and dangerous fields. Lorraine had never planned to join the military. She had studied chemistry in college, fascinated by how elements combined and transformed, by the power and beauty of molecular structures. Her professors had encouraged her to pursue research, but after graduation, she had felt directionless. A chance conversation with an Army recruiter at a career fair had changed everything. "We need people like you," the recruiter had said. "People who understand science and want to serve their country. Have you ever considered the chemical corps?" She hadn't, but the idea intrigued her. Within months, she had joined up, gone through officer training, and begun a career that would define her for nearly 2 decades. The work was challenging, demanding, and vitally important. Chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats were real, and the Army needed experts who could detect, identify, and neutralize them. Lorraine had been good at her job, very good. She rose through the ranks, earned commendations, and became known as someone who stayed calm under pressure. Her expertise was sought after for training programs, equipment development, and crisis response planning. She traveled to bases around the world, worked with international partners, and took pride in knowing that her work protected soldiers and civilians alike. She remembered the camaraderie, the sense of purpose, the satisfaction of mastering complex challenges. She remembered early mornings on base, the sharp salute, the feeling of her uniform pressed crisp and professional. She remembered colleagues who became like family, sharing meals, stories, and the unique bond that comes from serving together. But she also remembered why she left. Lorraine's hands trembled slightly as she tied the herb bundles. She set them down and took a deep breath. Even after all these years, thinking about that day made her heart race. It had happened during what should have been a routine training exercise. The exercise was designed to test rapid response protocols for a chemical incident. Soldiers would practice detection, protective measures, and decontamination procedures. Lorraine, then a captain with 15 years of experience, was overseeing the technical aspects. She had done similar exercises dozens of times. Everything was supposed to be safe, controlled, and educational. But something went wrong. One of the storage containers had a defect that nobody had noticed during the pre-exercise inspection. During the simulation, a seal failed. Real chemical agent began leaking into the training area. It wasn't supposed to be there. The exercise should have used harmless simulants, but there had been a terrible mistake in the supply chain. Someone had delivered the wrong materials. Lorraine had been the first to notice. Years of training had made her sensitive to even the slightest indicators of danger. She had smelled something wrong, seen soldiers beginning to show symptoms, and immediately realized what was happening. "Gas! Real agent! Everyone evacuate now!" she had shouted, triggering the emergency protocols. The next hours were a nightmare of chaos and fear. Soldiers stumbling, coughing, some collapsing. The frantic rush to get everyone into protective gear and out of the contaminated zone. Emergency medical teams rushing in. Decontamination procedures that seemed to take forever. The terrible wait to find out if anyone would suffer permanent damage or worse. Lorraine had worked through it all, despite her own exposure. She had coordinated the response, ensured proper procedures were followed, stayed at her post until every last soldier was accounted for and receiving medical attention. Only after the crisis was contained did she allow herself to be examined and treated. 17 soldiers had been seriously affected. 3 had required hospitalization. Lorraine herself had symptoms that lasted for weeks: breathing difficulties, headaches, fatigue, and a persistent cough. But the physical effects were nothing compared to the psychological aftermath. The nightmares started immediately. She would dream of soldiers dying, of gas-filling rooms, of being unable to breathe. She would wake up gasping, her heart pounding, convinced that she smelled chemicals in her bedroom. Panic attacks became frequent. The sight of her uniform triggered anxiety. Even walking onto the base made her feel sick. The Army's investigation concluded that the incident resulted from multiple failures in the supply chain and inspection process. Nobody blamed Lorraine. In fact, she received commendation for her quick response that prevented a catastrophe. But she blamed herself. She replayed the day over and over, wondering if she could have prevented it, if she had missed something, if her expertise should have warned her sooner. Her commanding officers noticed her struggle. They sent her to counseling. The therapist diagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder and recommended medical leave. Lorraine resisted at first. She didn't want to admit weakness. She didn't want to leave the career she had built. But as months passed and her symptoms worsened rather than improved, she had to face reality. She couldn't do it anymore. Every day on the job was torture. Every training exercise triggered panic. Every chemical lab made her want to run. The thing she had been so good at, so proud of, had become her personal nightmare. After 18 years of service, Captain Lorraine Baker submitted her resignation. It was one of the hardest decisions of her life, but also necessary for her survival. The Army accepted her retirement with honors, acknowledged her years of excellent service, and wished her well. But leaving the military didn't immediately solve her problems. Lorraine spent months adrift, living off her retirement benefits, trying to figure out who she was without the structure and identity that the Army had provided. She moved from place to place, unable to settle, unable to heal. Then she found High Meadow. She had been driving through the area, no particular destination in mind, when she passed through the small town. Something about it called to her. The peaceful valley, the friendly faces, the sense of community. She stopped for lunch at a local diner and got into a conversation with the owner, who mentioned that the old grocery store was for sale. On impulse, Lorraine went to look at it. The building was run down but structurally sound. It had an apartment upstairs and commercial space below. As she walked through the empty rooms, imagining fresh paint and new shelves, she felt the first stirrings of hope she had experienced in a long time. This could be a new start, a different life, a chance to be someone other than Captain Baker, chemical weapons expert. She could be just Lorraine, shop owner, community member. She could leave the nightmares behind and build something simple and good. She bought the building with money from her retirement savings and threw herself into the renovation. Physical work felt therapeutic. Painting walls, installing shelves, scrubbing floors. It was exhausting and satisfying. She gradually transformed the neglected space into the welcoming shop it was today. Opening Baker's fresh produce felt like a rebirth. Lorraine carefully constructed a new identity, one that had nothing to do with military service or chemical expertise. She learned about fruits, vegetables, and local agriculture. She built relationships with farmers and customers. She became part of the High Meadow community. For 10 years, it had worked. She had created a peaceful life for herself. The nightmares became less frequent. The panic attacks diminished. She could go days, sometimes weeks, without thinking about that terrible day at the training facility. She had learned to manage her PTSD with therapy, medication, healthy routines, and the support of a community that accepted her without question. But complete healing remained elusive. The memories were always there, lurking beneath the surface. Certain smells, sounds, or situations could trigger them. She avoided news about military incidents. She changed the channel when chemical weapons were mentioned on television. She had created a careful, controlled environment where she felt safe, and she worked hard to maintain it. Lorraine finished bundling the herbs and placed them in the display cooler. She looked at her hands, steady again, capable. These hands that once handled dangerous materials now handled tomatoes and lettuce. These hands that once saluted commanding officers now counted change for customers. It was such a different life, but it was her life now, and she was grateful for it. The sound of the shop door opening interrupted her thoughts. Her first customer of the day had arrived, bringing her firmly back to the present moment. Lorraine smiled, pushed the memories aside, and prepared to face another day in her chosen sanctuary. Over the next few days, life in High Meadow continued its pleasant, predictable rhythm. Lorraine found comfort in the routine. Each morning brought the same tasks, the same faces, the same gentle interactions that had become so precious to her. Thursday morning saw the weekly delivery from Johnson's farm. Tom and Linda Johnson had been farming the same land for 40 years, growing the finest vegetables in the county. They pulled up in their weathered pickup truck at 8 o'clock sharp, as they did every Thursday. "Morning, Lorraine," Tom called out cheerfully as he began unloading crates. "Got some beautiful corn for you this week. Weather's been perfect for it." "Wonderful," Lorraine replied, helping to carry boxes into the shop. "My customers have been asking about corn for weeks. They'll be delighted." Linda came around from the passenger side, wiping her hands on her jeans. "We also brought extra zucchini. Our plants went crazy this year. Thought you might want some for a discount." Lorraine inspected the vegetables, running her hands over smooth skin and firm stalks with the practiced touch of someone who knew quality when she saw it. "These are beautiful. I'll take all of it. And please, no discount. You work too hard to undervalue your produce." Tom and Linda exchanged a warm glance. They had been doing business with Lorraine for 10 years, and she had always treated them fairly. In a world where many retailers tried to squeeze every penny from farmers, Lorraine's respect and fair pricing meant everything. As they unloaded and arranged the produce, Linda mentioned the upcoming town festival. "It's in 2 weeks. Are you planning to have a booth this year?" "I am," Lorraine confirmed. "I thought I'd offer fresh fruit cups and vegetable samplers, something healthy for people to snack on while they enjoy the festivities." "That's a great idea," Tom said. "Last year's festival was wonderful. The whole town came out. Good food, music, games for the kids. It's one of my favorite days of the year." The High Meadow Harvest Festival was indeed a highlight of the community calendar. Held every September, it celebrated the bounty of the season and brought residents together for a day of food, entertainment, and fellowship. Local businesses set up booths, families displayed their crafts, and everyone enjoyed the sense of togetherness that made small-town life special. After the Johnsons left, Lorraine set up her produce displays, making sure everything looked fresh and inviting. The corn was indeed beautiful, plump golden kernels wrapped in green husks. She imagined families roasting it for dinner, the sweet smell filling their kitchens. The morning brought a steady flow of customers. Mrs. Patterson needed ingredients for her famous vegetable soup. Young Jake Martinez was shopping for his mother, who was recovering from surgery. The elderly Crawford sisters came in together, as they always did, moving slowly but determined to do their own shopping despite their adult children's offers to help. "We're not helpless yet," Eleanor Crawford said with a touch of pride when Lorraine offered to help carry their bags to their car. "But thank you, dear. You're always so thoughtful." These interactions filled Lorraine's heart. She genuinely cared about the people of High Meadow. Their joys were her joys, their struggles touched her. When Mr. Wilson lost his wife to illness last year, Lorraine had been there with food and quiet comfort. When the Martinez family's house flooded during a storm, she had donated supplies and helped with cleanup. This was what community meant, people looking after each other. Around lunchtime, Sheriff Thomas Brennan stopped by. He was a regular customer and also someone Lorraine considered a friend. In his mid-50s, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors, Tom Brennan had served as High Meadows sheriff for over 20 years. He knew everyone in town and took his responsibilities seriously. "Hey, Lorraine," he greeted her with a smile. "I need something quick for lunch. What do you recommend?" The tomatoes are perfect right now, she suggested. You could make a nice sandwich. I have fresh bread from the bakery this morning, too. Sounds perfect. Tom selected a few tomatoes and a loaf of bread, then added some cheese and lettuce. As Lorraine rang up his purchases, he asked, "Everything going well? Any problems I should know about?" "Everything's fine," Lorraine assured him. "Quiet and peaceful, just the way I like it." Tom nodded. "That's good. Though I've got to admit, sometimes I miss the excitement of big city police work. Biggest thing I've dealt with this week was Mrs. Murphy's cat stuck in a tree." Lorraine laughed softly. "And did you rescue it?" "Called the fire department. Charlie brought the ladder truck and had that cat down in 5 minutes. Mrs. Murphy baked him cookies." Tom shook his head with amusement. "That's law enforcement in High Meadow. Cookie-worthy rescues." "It sounds perfect to me," Lorraine said sincerely. "Yeah," Tom agreed, his expression softening. "Yeah, it really is." After Tom left, Lorraine took a moment to step outside and enjoy the September sunshine. Main Street was busy with afternoon activity. People walked along the sidewalk, stopping to chat with neighbors. Children played in the small park across the street, their laughter carrying on the breeze. The bell tower of First Church chimed twice, marking the hour. This was the life Lorraine had chosen, and moments like this reminded her why. No one here knew about Captain Baker or chemical weapons or traumatic training accidents. Here, she was just Lorraine, part of the community fabric, contributing in her small way to the peace and prosperity of this little town. That evening, Lorraine attended the book club meeting at the library. 7 other women were already gathered when she arrived, chatting and laughing in the comfortable meeting room. Judy Foster, the librarian, waved her over enthusiastically. "Lorraine, perfect timing. I was just about to serve tea. Did you bring the pears?" "Of course." Lorraine set down a basket containing a dozen perfectly ripe pears. "These are Bartlett pears, wonderfully sweet right now." The women gathered around the table, helping themselves to tea, cookies that someone had brought, and slices of pear. Once everyone was settled, Judy called the meeting to order. "Welcome, everyone. Tonight we're discussing The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I hope you all had a chance to read it. Such a lovely story. Who would like to start?" The discussion flowed naturally. The women talked about themes of healing and transformation, about the power of nature to restore the spirit, about the journey from bitterness to joy that the main character experiences. Lorraine listened more than she spoke, but when she did contribute, her observations were thoughtful and well received. "I think Mary's transformation happens because she finds purpose," Lorraine offered at one point. "At the beginning, she's focused only on herself, her own misery, but when she discovers the garden and takes responsibility for bringing it back to life, she discovers her own life in the process." "That's beautiful," Margaret Henderson said. "Purpose and connection. They're what make life meaningful, aren't they?" Lorraine nodded, thinking about how true that was in her own life. Building her shop, serving her community, making these connections. That was her garden, the thing that had brought her back to life after trauma. The meeting lasted 2 hours and ended with friendly goodbyes and plans for next month's selection. As Lorraine walked home under the stars, she felt deeply content. These friendships, this community, they had saved her in ways that therapy and medication alone never could. The next few days passed peacefully. Friday brought the usual weekend shoppers stocking up for family meals. Saturday was busy with people preparing for weekend barbecues and gatherings. Sunday was quiet, as most of High Meadow attended church services and spent the afternoon with family. On Monday morning, Lorraine was arranging a display of late summer squash when she noticed something odd. Through the shop window, she could see unusual activity at the old industrial building 3 blocks down Main Street. Several official-looking vehicles were parked outside, and people in business attire were walking around with clipboards and cameras. The building had once been a small chemical manufacturing facility that produced cleaning products and industrial solvents. It had closed down 15 years ago when the company moved operations overseas. Since then, it had sat empty, a weathered reminder of the town's more industrial past. There had been talk of tearing it down or converting it into something useful, but nothing had come of it. The building simply sat there, locked up and ignored. Sheriff Brennan walked past the shop, and Lorraine stepped outside to ask him about it. "Tom, what's going on at the old factory?" The sheriff paused, shading his eyes as he looked down the street. "Environmental assessment team. The county finally got around to inspecting the site. They want to make sure there aren't any hazardous materials left before they approve demolition." "That makes sense," Lorraine said, though she felt a small flutter of unease in her chest. The mention of hazardous materials, even in this casual context, always triggered a slight anxiety response. "Should have been done years ago, if you ask me," Tom continued, "but better late than never. They say the inspection will take about a week, making sure everything's properly sealed up and safe." "Good," Lorraine managed, keeping her voice steady. "Safety first." After Tom continued on his way, Lorraine stood there a moment longer, looking at the old factory. It was just a routine inspection. Nothing to worry about. Everything was fine. She repeated these thoughts like a mantra, pushing down the anxiety that tried to rise up. She went back into the shop and busied herself with work. Routine was her friend. Familiar tasks helped quiet the worried voice in her head. She served customers, restocked shelves, chatted about ordinary things, and gradually the unease faded. That night, as Lorraine was closing up the shop, she paused to look out the window one more time toward the old factory. The assessment team's vehicles were gone now, but security lights illuminated the building's exterior. It looked peaceful enough in the evening light. "It's nothing," Lorraine whispered to herself. "Just routine business, nothing to do with you." She locked up and went upstairs to her apartment, ready to enjoy a quiet evening with a good book and a cup of tea. She had no way of knowing that the old factory would soon become the center of a crisis that would turn her peaceful life upside down and force her to confront the very skills and knowledge she had spent 10 years trying to forget. Tuesday morning arrived with a beautiful sunrise. Lorraine woke feeling refreshed and optimistic. Her sleep had been undisturbed by nightmares, which was always a good sign. She went through her morning routine with the ease of long practice and opened the shop right at 7 o'clock. The early morning customers were her favorites. People on their way to work who stopped in for fresh fruit or to grab vegetables for that evening's dinner. There was something peaceful about these early transactions, the quiet exchanges before the day's energy ramped up. Around 8:30, as Lorraine was helping Mrs. Peterson select peaches, she noticed something strange. A faint odor drifted through the open door of the shop. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but something about it made her pause mid-sentence. "Are you all right, dear?" Mrs. Peterson asked, noticing Lorraine's sudden stillness. "Yes, Do you smell something unusual?" Mrs. Peterson sniffed the air. "I don't smell anything. Well, maybe a bit of a chemical smell, like cleaning products, but it's very faint." Lorraine's heart began to beat faster. She moved toward the door and stepped outside, inhaling carefully. There it was, a thin, acidic smell on the morning breeze. Most people probably wouldn't notice it, or would dismiss it as someone cleaning windows or painting. But Lorraine's trained nose recognized it as something different, something potentially dangerous. She fought down the immediate surge of panic. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was just her anxiety playing tricks on her. God knew her PTSD could make her hypersensitive to certain stimuli. but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "Lorraine?" Mrs. Peterson had followed her outside, looking concerned. "You've gone quite pale. Should I call someone?" No, I'm fine," Lorraine assured her quickly, though her hands were starting to shake slightly. "Just felt a bit dizzy for a moment. Low blood sugar, probably. I'll have some juice." Mrs. Peterson wasn't entirely convinced, but she accepted Lorraine's explanation. They completed the transaction, and after the customer left, Lorraine stood behind her counter trying to calm her racing heart. She was overreacting. She had to be. This was just her trauma response being triggered by an innocent smell. She forced herself to focus on work. More customers came in. The morning progressed normally, but every time someone opened the door, Lorraine would tense, waiting to smell that odd odor again. It seemed to come and go, carried on the shifting breeze. Around 10 o'clock, she decided she was being ridiculous. She had smelled cleaning chemicals, nothing more. People used such products every day without incident. There was no reason to let her past profession turn every unusual smell into a catastrophe. But then Jake Martinez came into the shop, and Lorraine's concern deepened. "Morning, Ms. Baker," the young man said, but his voice sounded rough. He coughed several times, covering his mouth with his hand. "Jake, are you all right? That sounds like a nasty cough." He nodded, though he looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, I don't know what's up. My throat's been scratchy since I got to work this morning. I work at the gas station, you know, down by the old factory. Several of us are feeling a bit off. Headaches, sore throats. Maybe it's just allergies or something going around." Lorraine felt ice water flood her veins. Workers near the old factory building experiencing respiratory symptoms. The unusual smell on the air. These things connected in her mind with the terrible certainty of professional knowledge. She kept her voice calm with tremendous effort. "Have you mentioned this to anyone? The sheriff, maybe?" Jake shrugged. "It's just allergies, probably. Though now that you mention it, I did notice a weird smell this morning. Kind of chemical-like. I figured maybe they're doing some kind of cleaning at the old plant as part of that inspection." After Jake left with his purchases, still coughing, Lorraine stood motionless behind the counter. Her professional training was screaming at her that something was seriously wrong, but her traumatized psyche was equally loudly insisting she not get involved, that she stay far away from anything that reminded her of her past. She closed her eyes and took several deep breaths. "Think rationally," she told herself. "What are the facts?" 1. There's an unusual chemical smell in the air. 2. People who work near the old factory are experiencing mild respiratory symptoms. 3. The factory once stored industrial chemicals and solvents. Her mind, despite her efforts to suppress it, immediately began analyzing possibilities. If containers had deteriorated over 15 years of abandonment, seals could have failed. If the assessment team had disturbed something, they might have caused a release. If there were old storage tanks or buried materials, environmental factors could have caused degradation. But surely the professionals conducting the assessment would have noticed, right? They had equipment, protocols, expertise. They would have detected a release. Unless Lorraine felt sweat break out on her forehead. What if the release was very recent? What if it had happened overnight, after the assessment team left? What if whatever was leaking was doing so in small amounts, not enough to trigger fixed sensors, but enough to cause health effects in people downwind? She was spiraling. She recognized the signs, the racing thoughts, the worst-case scenarios building in her mind, the physical symptoms of anxiety. This was her PTSD talking. She needed to ground herself, calm down, think clearly. Lorraine walked to her small office in the back of the shop and sat down at her desk. She pulled out the techniques her therapist had taught her. 5 things you can see: desk, computer, filing cabinet, calendar, coffee mug. 4 things you can touch: smooth desk surface, cool metal of the chair, soft fabric of her shirt, hard plastic of the phone. 3 things you can hear: the hum of the refrigerator units, a car passing outside, a bird singing. 2 things you can smell: the faint scent of oranges from the shop, her own lavender hand lotion. 1 thing you can taste: the coffee she'd had this morning, still lingering. The grounding exercise helped. Her heartbeat slowed, her breathing steadied. She felt more in control, but the concern remained. If there really was a chemical release, even a small one, it needed to be reported and investigated. People could get sick. The situation could worsen. Lorraine picked up her phone and dialed the sheriff's office. Deputy Rodriguez answered. High Meadow Sheriff's Office, Deputy Rodriguez speaking. Carlos, this is Lorraine Baker. Is Sheriff Brennan available? He's out on patrol, Ms. Baker. Can I help you with something? Lorraine hesitated. How did she explain her concern without revealing her background? I've noticed an unusual smell in the air this morning, and one of the customers mentioned people feeling sick near the old factory. I thought the sheriff should know. What kind of smell? Carlos asked, his tone becoming more professional. Chemical, like industrial solvents or cleaning products, but stronger. It comes and goes with the wind. That's probably from the assessment team working at the old plant. They're doing environmental testing. I'm sure they're following all proper safety procedures. Yes, but Jake Martinez said he and his co-workers are experiencing symptoms. Sore throats, coughing, headaches. That seems concerning. Carlos paused. I'll make a note of it and let the sheriff know. But honestly, Ms. Baker, it's probably just allergies. September's bad for ragweed around here. Half the town's been sneezing and coughing. Perhaps, Lorraine said, though she didn't believe it. But would you ask the sheriff to contact the assessment team, just to verify everything's secure? Sure, I can do that. Thanks for calling, Ms. Baker. After hanging up, Lorraine sat at her desk, feeling frustrated. The deputy hadn't taken her seriously, dismissing her concerns as overreaction. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was letting her past cloud her judgment. But 18 years of training and experience wouldn't let her simply ignore what her instincts were telling her. She decided to walk down Main Street toward the old factory. Not too close, she wouldn't cross the property line, but close enough to observe. If there was visible evidence of a problem, she could report it more specifically. Lorraine locked the shop and put up a "back in 15 minutes" sign. She walked down the sidewalk, trying to appear casual, though her nerves were on edge. As she approached the gas station where Jake worked, she could smell it again, that acrid chemical odor. It was definitely stronger here than at her shop 3 blocks away. The gas station attendant, a young woman Lorraine recognized but didn't know well, was serving a customer while coughing into her elbow. 2 other employees stood by the air pump, both looking uncomfortable. One was rubbing his eyes. The other kept clearing his throat. Lorraine's professional assessment confirmed her fears. Multiple people showing similar symptoms in the same location, all exposed to the same unusual smell. This wasn't allergies. This was chemical exposure. She walked another block toward the factory, though every instinct screamed at her to turn back. The smell grew stronger. Not dangerous levels yet. Her training allowed her to estimate concentration fairly accurately, but definitely present and increasing. Whatever was releasing this chemical was doing so at a growing rate. The old factory loomed ahead, its weathered concrete walls and grimy windows giving it a forlorn appearance. The environmental assessment team's vehicles weren't there. They probably only worked during regular business hours, 9 to 5. If something had gone wrong overnight or early this morning, they wouldn't know yet. Lorraine stopped at the property line, not willing to go any closer without protective equipment. She scanned the building as best she could from a distance. Most of the loading dock doors were closed. A few windows were broken, likely vandalism from years of abandonment. She couldn't see obvious signs of a leak. No visible gas cloud, no staining on walls, no unusual activity. But her nose told her what her eyes couldn't see. Something inside that building was releasing chemical vapor, and it was drifting downwind across part of High Meadow. The wind was currently blowing from the northeast, which meant the gas station and several residential homes were in the path. If the wind shifted, more of the town would be affected. Lorraine pulled out her phone and called the sheriff's office again. "Deputy Rodriguez, it's Lorraine Baker again. I'm standing near the old factory, and the chemical smell is quite strong here. I really think someone needs to investigate immediately. There could be an active release of hazardous materials." "Ms. Baker, I appreciate your concern, but I'm sure the assessment team knows what they're doing. If there was a real problem, their sensors would have detected it." "Their sensors are only on site when they're working," Lorraine countered, struggling to keep frustration out of her voice. "If something happened overnight or this morning after they left, the sensors wouldn't have recorded it. Please, just call the team leader and ask them to check. It can't hurt to be cautious." Carlos sighed. "Fine, I'll try to reach them. But I'm sure everything's fine, Ms. Baker. You're worrying unnecessarily." After the call ended, Lorraine stood there feeling helpless. She had reported the problem. She had done what a concerned citizen should do. But she knew it wasn't enough. The deputy thought she was overreacting. He would make a casual call to the assessment team, who might or might not take it seriously. Meanwhile, people were being exposed to something potentially harmful. The old Lorraine, Captain Baker, would have taken charge. She would have established a perimeter, evacuated affected areas, contacted proper authorities, initiated emergency protocols. She would have acted with confidence and authority, knowing exactly what needed to be done. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She was just Lorraine Baker, shop owner. She had no authority, no official capacity, no right to take action. And more than that, she was terrified. The very thought of dealing with a chemical emergency made her want to run in the opposite direction. Her PTSD was a roaring presence in her mind, screaming at her to get away, to protect herself, to not risk reliving her trauma. Lorraine turned and walked quickly back toward her shop. Her hands were shaking. Her heart pounded. She felt like she couldn't get enough air, though she knew it was panic, not chemical exposure. She needed to get back to her safe space, lock the door, and calm down. As she reached her shop, Lorraine glanced back toward the factory. Several more people were on the street now, going about their morning business, completely unaware of potential danger. She thought about Jake's cough, about the gas station attendants rubbing their eyes, about the faint chemical smell that was growing stronger with each passing hour. She couldn't do this. She couldn't be Captain Baker again. She had left that life behind. But she also couldn't stand by and watch while people she cared about were exposed to hazardous chemicals. Lorraine stood frozen on the sidewalk, torn between her past and present, between duty and trauma, between the person she had been and the person she had worked so hard to become. The next decision she made would determine whether she could continue hiding from her past or whether the very skills she had fled would be demanded of her once more. Lorraine unlocked her shop with trembling hands and stepped inside, immediately locking the door behind her. She leaned against it, eyes closed, trying to control her breathing. The panic attack was in full force now, chest tight, vision tunneling, the world tilting around her. "Not now," she whispered fiercely. "I can't fall apart now." She forced herself to walk to her office and sit down. She kept a small emergency kit in her desk drawer for moments like this, moments when the past threatened to overwhelm the present. She pulled out the bottle of anti-anxiety medication her doctor had prescribed and took one pill, washing it down with water from the bottle she always kept nearby. Then she waited. The medication would take 20 to 30 minutes to work, but just the act of taking it helped psychologically. She had a tool to manage this. She wasn't helpless. She could cope. While she waited for the medication to take effect, Lorraine tried to think logically about the situation. What did she actually know? The facts were clear. Chemical smell, respiratory symptoms in exposed individuals, source likely from the old factory. These were objective observations that any trained professional would recognize as cause for concern. What she didn't know was the severity. Was this a minor release that would dissipate harmlessly? Or was it something that could escalate into a real emergency? Without proper testing equipment, she couldn't determine the exact nature or concentration of the chemical. She could only estimate based on odor threshold and symptom presentation, which was imprecise at best. Lorraine pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in years. She searched for information about the old factory. What exactly had they manufactured there? What chemicals would have been stored on site? The internet was remarkably helpful when you knew what questions to ask. She found old business licenses, environmental permits, and safety reports filed with various government agencies. The factory had primarily produced industrial cleaning solvents and degreasers. The main chemicals used included various organic solvents, acids for pH adjustment, and stabilizing compounds. Many of these substances, while not immediately life-threatening in small doses, could cause respiratory irritation, headaches, and other symptoms if released into the air. More concerning was a report from 12 years ago about improper storage practices. The company had been cited for keeping materials in corroded containers. They had paid a fine and supposedly corrected the issues, but then the factory closed 3 years later. What if those old containers were still there, slowly degrading over time? Lorraine's anxiety was subsiding somewhat as the medication began to work, but her professional concern was growing. This was exactly the kind of scenario that could turn dangerous quickly. A slow release might seem minor at first, but as more material leaked out, concentrations would increase. People would be exposed for longer periods, symptoms would worsen, and if whatever was leaking caught fire, or if multiple chemicals mixed. She stopped that train of thought. No point in catastrophizing. Stick to what was known and actionable. The shop phone rang, startling her. Lorraine answered, trying to keep her voice steady. Baker's Fresh Produce. This is Lorraine. Lorraine, it's Margaret Henderson. I hate to bother you, but I'm feeling quite unwell. I wondered if you might have any fresh ginger. I've heard it helps with nausea. Lorraine's concern sharpened. Margaret lived 2 blocks from the factory. When did the nausea start, Margaret? This morning, not long after I got back from my walk. I also have a terrible headache and I can't seem to shake this scratchy feeling in my throat. Maybe it's a stomach bug? Have you noticed any unusual smells? Chemical-like odors? Now that you mention it, yes. I thought someone was painting or cleaning. It's quite strong sometimes. Why do you ask? Lorraine made a decision. She couldn't stand by any longer. Margaret, I want you to listen carefully. Close all your windows and doors. Turn off any fans or ventilation systems. Stay inside and drink plenty of water. If your symptoms get worse, call 911 immediately. Do you understand? Goodness, you're frightening me. What's wrong? I'm not sure yet, but I think there might be a chemical release from the old factory. I'm trying to get authorities to investigate. Just stay inside for now as a precaution, all right? Yes, of course. Oh dear. Should I call my neighbors? If you can reach them without going outside, yes. Tell them the same thing. And Margaret? I'm going to bring you that ginger, but I need to take care of something first. After hanging up, Lorraine sat motionless for a moment, then stood with sudden resolve. She couldn't wait for the authorities to take her seriously. People were getting sick now. She might not be Captain Baker anymore, but she still had knowledge that could help. She couldn't let fear paralyze her while her neighbors suffered. Lorraine grabbed a notepad and began writing down everything she knew. The symptoms people were experiencing, the locations of affected individuals, wind direction, time of onset, progression of the chemical smell. Then she called the sheriff's office again. This time, Sheriff Brennan himself answered. "Lorraine, Carlos said you called twice about the old factory." "What's going on?" "Tom, I need you to listen to me very carefully." Lorraine kept her voice calm and authoritative, drawing on years of military training. "There is a chemical release happening at the old factory. I can smell it, and it's affecting people downwind. I have documented multiple cases of respiratory symptoms, headaches, and nausea in individuals exposed to the odor. This is not allergies. This is chemical exposure, and it's getting worse." Tom's tone changed, becoming more serious. "Okay, you have my attention. What makes you so certain?" Lorraine had to make a choice. She could continue pretending to be just a concerned shop owner, or she could reveal her expertise. People's health was at stake. Her secret seemed far less important. "Tom, there's something I've never told anyone in High Meadow. I spent 18 years in the Army Chemical Corps. I was a chemical weapons specialist. I know what I'm talking about. The smell I'm detecting is consistent with industrial solvent release. The symptom pattern matches low-level exposure, and based on wind patterns, more people are about to be affected. We need to act now." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You're serious?" "Completely. Tom, please trust me. Contact the environmental assessment team immediately. Tell them there's an active release. We need to evacuate the immediate area and get hazmat teams on site. Every minute we wait, more people are being exposed." "Jesus," Tom's voice was tight. Okay, I'm calling them right now. Can you meet me at the station in 10 minutes? I need you to brief me on what we're dealing with. I'll be there." Lorraine hung up and stood, her legs slightly shaky but her mind clear. The medication and the decision to act had pushed back the panic. She was still frightened, but she was functioning. She locked up her shop again and walked quickly toward the sheriff's station. As she moved through town, she noticed more people on the street looking uncomfortable, rubbing their eyes, coughing, holding handkerchiefs to their noses. The problem was spreading as the wind carried the chemical vapor further into town. The sheriff's station was a small brick building on Oak Street. Lorraine entered to find Tom Brennan already on the phone, his expression grave. Deputy Rodriguez looked confused and concerned. When Tom saw Lorraine, he waved her into his office. "Yes, I understand, but I have someone here with chemical expertise who says we have an active release." "No, I'm not kidding. Can you get someone here now? How long?" Tom listened, his jaw tightening. 30 minutes? Fine, but people are getting sick. We need to start evacuations." He hung up and looked at Lorraine. "The assessment team is sending someone, but their hazmat unit is 30 minutes away." Lorraine nodded. "Then we start evacuations now. Everyone within 3 blocks downwind of the factory needs to be moved. We need to establish a safe perimeter and prevent people from entering the affected area." "You're really sure about this?" Tom searched her face. "If we evacuate and it turns out to be nothing, I'm going to look pretty foolish." "Better foolish than attending funerals," Lorraine said bluntly. "Tom, I wouldn't have revealed my background if I wasn't absolutely certain. This is real. It's happening now, and it's going to get worse before it gets better." Tom made his decision. "All right, Carlos," he called to his deputy. "Get on the radio. I want every available officer here now. We're doing an evacuation." He turned back to Lorraine. What else do I need to know? Lorraine pulled out her notes. Here's what we're dealing with. She spread the paper on his desk and began explaining, and for the first time in 10 years, she allowed herself to be Captain Baker again. The transformation was startling, even to Lorraine herself. As she stood in Sheriff Brennan's office, pointing to her notes and explaining chemical exposure protocols, she felt years of carefully constructed walls crumbling. The person she had tried so hard not to be anymore was emerging, and there was no stopping it now. We need to divide the area into zones, Lorraine explained, pulling a map of High Meadow from Tom's wall and spreading it on his desk. Hot zone, warm zone, and cold zone. The hot zone is the factory itself and approximately 50 meters around it in all directions. Nobody goes in without proper protective equipment. Tom nodded, writing quickly. Got it. And the warm zone? Everything downwind within 3 blocks. That's where we've seen symptoms. People need to be evacuated from homes and businesses in this area immediately. She traced the zone with her finger. We also need to establish a decontamination station at the edge of the warm zone. Anyone showing symptoms should be checked before moving into the cold zone. Deputy Rodriguez had joined them, looking skeptical, but following orders. Ms. Baker, I mean no disrespect, but how do you know all this? I was a chemical defense officer in the Army for 18 years, Lorraine said, not taking her eyes off the map. Captain Lorraine Baker, Chemical Corps. I specialized in detection, identification, and response to chemical threats. Carlos's eyes widened. Holy language, Tom muttered automatically, then looked at Lorraine with new respect. Okay, Lorraine, tell us what to do. Over the next 20 minutes, Lorraine laid out an emergency response plan. Officers would go door to door in the affected area, evacuating residents to the community center, which was upwind and safe. They would establish perimeter controls to keep people out of the danger zone. The fire department would be contacted to set up a basic decontamination station. And someone needed to get to the factory to try to identify the source and shut it down if possible. But not without proper equipment, Lorraine emphasized. Nobody enters that building without at minimum a respirator and protective clothing. The hazmat team will handle the actual investigation and containment. What about you? Tom asked. Should you be part of the hazmat team response? Lorraine felt ice flood her veins. The thought of suiting up and entering a contaminated building made her want to vomit. That was asking too much. That would put her right back in the nightmare she'd spent 10 years trying to escape. I can advise from outside, she said carefully. But I haven't done that work in a long time. The professionals will do better. Tom didn't push, though she saw understanding in his eyes. Fair enough. Okay, let's move. The next hour was organized chaos. High Meadow's small police force, supplemented by volunteer firefighters, began the evacuation. Lorraine stayed at the sheriff's station, coordinating via radio and phone. She felt herself slipping into a role she had played many times before. Calm, methodical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Sheriff, this is Unit 3. We've got an elderly couple who don't want to leave. They say it's just a smell and they're fine. Lorraine took the radio from Tom. This is Baker. What are their symptoms? Both complaining of headaches. The wife has a cough. Tell them those symptoms will get worse if they stay. If they refuse to leave voluntarily, you have my authorization to tell them the sheriff may need to enforce evacuation for their safety. Be gentle but firm. Copy that. The community center quickly filled with confused and concerned residents. Lorraine could see them through the window. Families with children, elderly folks looking bewildered, young people angry at the disruption. She felt their fear and frustration as if it were her own. Margaret Henderson appeared at the station, looking pale. "Lorraine, what's happening? They evacuated my entire street." "I'm so sorry, Margaret. I know this is frightening, but there is a chemical release from the old factory. We're taking precautions to keep everyone safe." "A chemical release? Good Lord. Is it dangerous?" "At current exposure levels, the symptoms are uncomfortable, but not life-threatening. But we don't want anyone exposed any longer than necessary. Please go to the community center. They're setting up cots and providing water. It shouldn't be more than a few hours until the situation is under control." After Margaret left, Tom came over to Lorraine. "The hazmat team is 10 minutes out. They want to know what we know about the chemicals that might be involved." Lorraine pulled up the information she had found earlier. The factory used various organic solvents: toluene, xylene, acetone, also some acids. If storage containers have failed, any combination of these could be releasing. The hazmat team will need to do atmospheric monitoring to determine exactly what we're dealing with. You found all this out how? Public records online, safety reports, and environmental permits. Tom shook his head admiringly. "You know, you're pretty impressive in crisis mode." Lorraine didn't feel impressive. She felt terrified and barely holding herself together. But she smiled weakly. "Just doing what needs to be done." When the hazmat team arrived, a van marked with the County Environmental Services logo, Lorraine felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. These were professionals who knew what they were doing. She could step back now. But at the same time, she felt compelled to ensure they had all the information they needed. The team leader was a woman in her 40s named Dr. Sarah Chen. She listened carefully as Lorraine briefed her on the situation, symptoms observed, wind conditions, and historical information about the facility. "You have a good eye for detail," Dr. Chen commented. "Most civilian reports are vague and unhelpful. This is excellent information." "I was Army Chemical Corps," Lorraine explained. "Retired." Understanding crossed Dr. Chen's face. "Ah, well, your training is showing. We'll suit up and investigate. Based on what you've told me, I agree this is likely an organic solvent release, probably from degraded storage containers. We should be able to identify and contain it quickly." "Be careful in there," Lorraine said. "The building has been abandoned for 15 years. Structural integrity might be compromised, and there could be multiple release points. We'll take all precautions. Thank you, Captain." "Just Lorraine. I'm not Captain anymore." Dr. Chen studied her for a moment, and Lorraine had the sense that this woman understood more than she was saying. "All right, Lorraine. Thank you for your help. We'll take it from here." Watching the hazmat team suit up in their protective gear made Lorraine's hands shake. The sight of the yellow suits, the breathing apparatus, the careful protocols, it all brought back memories so vivid she could almost smell the military base, hear the orders being shouted, feel the weight of her own protective equipment. She turned away, unable to watch. Tom noticed her distress. "You okay?" "Fine," Lorraine lied. It's been a long time since I've dealt with anything like this." "Come on." Tom guided her to his office and pointed to a chair. "Sit. I'll get you some water." Lorraine sank into the chair gratefully. Now that the immediate crisis was being handled by professionals, the adrenaline that had been keeping her going was wearing off. She felt exhausted, shaky, and overwhelmed. Tom returned with water and a candy bar. "Eat. You look like you're about to pass out." She nibbled the chocolate and sipped the water, trying to ground herself. Outside, she could see the hazmat team entering the old factory building. Please let them be safe, she thought. Please don't let anything go wrong. "So," Tom said gently, sitting across from her. "Army Chemical Corps, huh? That's quite a background to keep quiet." "I had my reasons." "I'm sure you did." But right now, I'm just grateful you were here. If you hadn't pushed me to take this seriously, if you hadn't known what to look for and what to do, people could have been seriously hurt. Lorraine shook her head. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But later. After more people got sick. You saved lives today, Lorraine. You should be proud. But Lorraine didn't feel proud. She felt exposed, raw, like she'd been turned inside out. Her carefully constructed new identity had been shattered. Everyone would know now. The quiet shop owner was actually a military specialist. The peaceful retired woman had a past she'd been hiding. How would people look at her now? I can see you're worried, Tom said. But if you're concerned about how people will react, don't be. High Meadow takes care of its own. Your past doesn't change who you've been to this community for 10 years. I hope you're right. They waited. 30 minutes passed, then 40. Lorraine couldn't sit still any longer. She went to the window, watching the factory. The hazmat team had been inside for almost an hour. That seemed like a long time. Finally, Dr. Chen emerged from the building and came back to the station. She was no longer in her protective suit, which Lorraine took as a good sign. We found it, Dr. Chen announced. 3 large storage tanks in the basement. They contained various solvents, probably left over when the factory closed. The tanks have been slowly corroding, and this week's temperature fluctuations caused accelerated degradation. One tank developed a significant leak last night. The vapor has been escaping through cracks in the foundation. Can you contain it? Tom asked. Already done. We've sealed the immediate leak and set up vapor recovery systems. We'll need to safely remove all the remaining chemicals, which will take a few days, but the immediate danger is over. We're doing atmospheric monitoring now to make sure air quality is returning to normal. Lorraine felt relief wash over her. What about the people who were exposed? At the concentration levels we measured, symptoms should resolve within a few hours with fresh air and hydration. No one should have lasting effects. You evacuated quickly enough to prevent serious exposure. Good call. See? Tom said to Lorraine. You saved lives. After Dr. Chen left to coordinate cleanup efforts, Tom began the process of allowing people to return to their homes. The all-clear wouldn't be official until air monitoring confirmed safe levels, but it looked like the crisis was over. Lorraine stood in the sheriff's station, watching through the window as evacuated residents began trickling back to their neighborhoods. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollowed out, exhausted in ways that went far beyond physical tiredness. Lorraine? Tom's voice was gentle. You should go home. Rest. You've done enough for one day. I suppose I should reopen the shop. Tomorrow. Today, you take care of yourself. Lorraine nodded slowly. She walked out of the station and down Main Street toward her shop. People stopped her along the way, some to thank her, others with questions. She answered as briefly as possible, desperate to reach the safety of her own space. When she finally made it upstairs to her apartment, she locked the door behind her and leaned against it. Then, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to completely fall apart. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside, wrenching and painful. She slid down to the floor, crying for the trauma she had never fully processed, for the identity she had lost and found and lost again, for the fear and stress of the day, for everything she had tried so hard to keep buried. She cried until she had no tears left, until exhaustion finally overwhelmed emotion. Then she crawled into bed, still in her clothes, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Lorraine woke the next morning feeling like she had been hit by a truck. Every muscle ached. Her head throbbed. Her eyes were swollen from crying. For a long moment, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, considering whether she could simply stay there forever. But eventually, practical concerns won out. She needed to use the bathroom. She was thirsty. And her stomach was reminding her that she had barely eaten yesterday. Slowly, Lorraine dragged herself out of bed and into the shower, letting hot water wash away some of the physical discomfort, if not the emotional weight. After dressing in clean clothes and fixing herself a simple breakfast, Lorraine felt marginally more human. She sat at her kitchen table with coffee and toast, trying to process everything that had happened. Yesterday, she had been forced to become Captain Baker again. She had revealed a secret she had kept for 10 years. She had used skills she thought she would never need again, and she had done it. Despite the PTSD, despite the panic, despite every instinct screaming at her to run away, she had done it. She had helped people. She had likely prevented a serious emergency. Lorraine wasn't sure how she felt about that. Proud? Terrified? Relieved? Traumatized all over again? Maybe all of those things at once. Her phone rang. Lorraine considered not answering, but caller ID showed it was Sheriff Brennan. With a sigh, she picked up. "Morning, Tom." "Morning. How are you doing?" "I've been better, but I'm okay." "Good. Listen, I wanted to give you an update. The air quality tests came back clean. The hazmat team worked through the night to neutralize and remove the chemicals. The building is secured. Everyone who was affected has recovered with no lasting problems. The county is fast-tracking demolition of that factory. The whole thing is over." "That's wonderful news." "It is. And Lorraine, I can't say it enough. You made the difference. If you hadn't recognized what was happening, if you hadn't pushed me to act quickly, this could have been much worse. The county environmental director called to personally thank you. They want to know if you'd be willing to consult on other old industrial sites in the area." Lorraine felt panic flutter in her chest. "Tom, I appreciate that, but I'm not looking to make this my job again. I did what needed to be done. That's all." "I understand. I'll let them know." Tom paused. "Also, word has gotten around town about your background. People are talking. Most of them are impressed and grateful, but I wanted to warn you that you might get some attention." After the call ended, Lorraine sat staring at her coffee. She had known this would happen. In a town the size of High Meadow, secrets didn't stay secret. By now, everyone probably knew that mild-mannered Lorraine Baker, who sold vegetables and belonged to the book club, was actually a retired military chemical weapons expert who had coordinated yesterday's emergency response. The thought of facing people made her want to hide. But she couldn't stay in her apartment forever. Eventually, she would have to go downstairs and open her shop. She would have to face customers and questions and curious looks. The comfortable anonymity she had enjoyed for 10 years was gone. Around 10 o'clock, Lorraine finally gathered her courage and went downstairs. She unlocked the shop and turned on the lights. Everything looked exactly as she had left it yesterday. Produce displays ready for customers, the cash register closed, the floor swept clean. It was ordinary and familiar, and she clung to that normalcy like a lifeline. She had been open for less than 10 minutes when Margaret Henderson came in. Lorraine braced herself for questions, but Margaret simply walked up and hugged her. "Thank you," Margaret said simply, "for keeping us safe, for knowing what to do, for being who you are." Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. "I was just trying to help." "Well, you did. I want you to know that nobody thinks any differently of you because of your past. If anything, we're even more grateful to have you here." Other customers followed throughout the day. Some came for their regular shopping. Others clearly came just to see Lorraine. The reactions were universally positive. Thanks, gratitude, respect. Several people apologized for not taking her concerns seriously when she first reported them. Mrs. Peterson brought homemade cookies. A small thank you for saving this town from disaster. Young Jake Martinez stopped by to apologize. I should have listened when you asked about my symptoms. I feel like an idiot for brushing it off as allergies. You couldn't have known, Lorraine assured him. The important thing is, everyone is safe. Around noon, a reporter from the county newspaper arrived. Ms. Baker, I'd love to interview you about yesterday's events. Your military background, your quick thinking, your coordination of the response. No interviews, Lorraine said firmly. I'm not looking for attention or recognition. I did what anyone with my training would do. But no interviews. I'm sorry, but I value my privacy. Please respect that. The reporter left looking disappointed, but Lorraine felt she had made the right choice. She didn't want to be treated as a hero. She didn't want media attention. She just wanted to go back to her quiet life as much as possible. But as the day continued, Lorraine realized that going back to exactly how things were before wasn't possible. The secret was out. People knew now. And while that was uncomfortable, it didn't have to be devastating. Maybe she could find a middle ground, acknowledge her past, but not let it define her present. That evening, Judy from the library called. Lorraine, I wanted to let you know that at tonight's town council meeting, they're planning to recognize your service, both military and to the community. Mayor Richardson wants to present you with a commendation. Would you be willing to attend? Lorraine's first instinct was to refuse. Public recognition was the last thing she wanted. But she realized that refusing might seem ungracious or strange. The town wanted to say thank you. She could accept that with grace, even if it made her uncomfortable. What time is the meeting? 7 o'clock at Town Hall. And Lorraine, I know you're a private person. They'll keep it brief and respectful. At 7 o'clock, Lorraine walked into the town hall meeting room. She was surprised to see how many people had shown up. The room was nearly full. When she entered, people began clapping. Lorraine felt her face flush, but she smiled and took a seat in the front row. Mayor Richardson, a friendly woman in her 60s who owned the hardware store, called the meeting to order. After some routine business, she addressed the room. Before we close, I want to take a moment to recognize someone special. Most of you know Lorraine Baker as the owner of Baker's Fresh Produce, a valued member of our community for 10 years. But yesterday, we learned something new about Lorraine. She's also Captain Lorraine Baker, retired, who served our country for 18 years as a chemical defense specialist. More applause. Lorraine forced herself to keep breathing steadily. When a chemical emergency threatened our town yesterday, Lorraine recognized the danger when others didn't. She used her expertise to identify the threat, coordinate an emergency response, and likely saved many people from serious harm. On behalf of High Meadow, I want to thank you, Lorraine, for your service to our country and your continued service to this community. The mayor presented Lorraine with a framed certificate and a handshake. Lorraine accepted both, smiled, and said a brief thank you. She didn't make a speech. She couldn't have managed one anyway. But the warmth and genuine appreciation she felt from the community touched her deeply. After the meeting, people came up to shake her hand and express gratitude. Lorraine accepted their thanks graciously, though she was emotionally exhausted by the time she finally escaped and walked home. Back in her apartment, Lorraine made tea and sat by the window. The certificate the mayor had given her lay on the table. She picked it up and read it. Presented to Lorraine Baker in recognition of her exceptional service and dedication to the safety and well-being of the High Meadow community. She set it down and sipped her tea. The past few days had been overwhelming, but she had survived them. More than that, she had faced her worst fears and come through intact. She had used the skills that traumatized her without completely falling apart. That felt like an achievement. Lorraine understood now that she would never fully leave behind Captain Baker. That part of her history was permanent, for better or worse. But maybe that was okay. Maybe instead of trying to completely separate her past from her present, she could integrate them. She could be both Lorraine the shop owner and Lorraine who once served her country. Both were valid. Both were her. As she prepared for bed that night, Lorraine felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of peace with her whole self. She had spent 10 years running from her past. Maybe it was time to stop running and simply stand still, accepting all the parts of who she was and had been. She fell asleep easily and dreamed of gardens and growth, of things broken being repaired, of wounds slowly healing. The weeks following the chemical incident brought significant changes to Lorraine's life, though not in the dramatic ways she had feared. High Meadow didn't transform her into some sort of celebrity or demand that she take on official roles. Instead, the town simply adjusted to knowing more about her, and life continued with a new layer of depth to old relationships. At the shop, customers were perhaps a bit more curious now. They asked more personal questions, though usually with tact and respect. Lorraine learned to deflect gently, sharing small pieces of her history without going into detail about the trauma that had ended her military career. "Did you ever work overseas?" someone might ask. "Yes, I spent time in Europe and Asia," Lorraine would reply. "The army took me to interesting places." She rarely mentioned the hard parts, the stress, the danger, the weight of responsibility, the incident that broke her. Those remained private. The environmental crisis had been contained, but the aftermath continued. The county fast-tracked the demolition of the old factory. Lorraine found herself quietly pleased to see it torn down, the rubble hauled away, the land cleared. The plot would become a small park, the county announced. Green space for the community, with trees and benches and a playground. Something life-giving would replace what had nearly caused harm. Lorraine's relationship with Sheriff Brennan deepened into genuine friendship. Tom stopped by the shop regularly now, not just as a customer, but as someone who understood what she had been through. He never pushed her to talk about her past, but he made it clear he was available if she needed support. "You doing okay?" he would ask casually, and Lorraine appreciated that he cared enough to check in. "I'm fine," she would assure him, and most days it was true. One afternoon in October, about 3 weeks after the incident, Dr. Sarah Chen from the hazmat team stopped by the shop. Lorraine was surprised to see her. "Dr. Chen, what brings you to High Meadow?" "I was in the area finalizing paperwork on the factory remediation, and I wanted to stop by." "Do you have a moment to talk?" They sat in Lorraine's small office, away from customers. Dr. Chen looked at her with professional assessment. "How are you managing? That was a stressful situation, and I know from your background that you likely have history with chemical incidents." Lorraine was startled by the directness, but appreciated it. "It was difficult," she admitted. "It brought back memories I've been working hard to move past. But I'm coping." "I thought it might. The way you briefed me that day, very professional, very knowledgeable. But I could see the strain. You were fighting hard to stay in control." "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows what to look for. I've seen it before. A lot of first responders and military specialists who've experienced trauma struggle when they have to use those same skills again." Dr. Chen paused. "Have you been receiving support? Therapy?" "Yes. I've been working with a therapist for years. I called him the day after the incident. We're processing through it." "Good. That's really good." Dr. Chen smiled. "I also wanted to tell you that your quick identification and response were textbook perfect. You probably prevented dozens of people from experiencing significant chemical exposure." The county is reviewing protocols for monitoring old industrial sites because of what happened here. I'm glad something positive came from it. After Dr. Chen left, Lorraine felt validated. It helped to have a professional acknowledge both her competence and her struggle. She wasn't weak for finding it difficult. She was strong for doing it anyway. The book club meeting that month had an unexpected twist. When Lorraine arrived at the library, Judy pulled her aside before the others arrived. Lorraine, I wanted to give you a heads up. The women have been talking and they have some questions about your military service. I told them they should respect your privacy, but they're curious. If you want to deflect or change the subject, I'll support you. Lorraine considered. She had been dreading exactly this kind of situation, being the center of attention, being questioned about things she didn't want to discuss. But these were her friends. They had welcomed her into their circle, accepted her, supported her. Maybe they deserved some honesty. It's okay, she told Judy. I can answer some questions. The meeting started normally, discussing the month's book selection. But after about half an hour, Eleanor Crawford cleared her throat. Lorraine, dear, we're all terribly curious. Would you mind telling us a bit about your time in the Army? We don't want to pry, but we're interested in your life. Lorraine set down her teacup. 7 pairs of eyes watched her with genuine interest and warmth. These weren't people looking for gossip. They were friends wanting to know her better. What would you like to know? The questions came gently. What was it like being in the Army? What did a chemical defense officer do? Did she enjoy the work? Were there other women in her field? Had it been difficult being in what was traditionally a male-dominated career? Lorraine answered as honestly as she could. She talked about the training, the camaraderie, the satisfaction of knowing her work protected people. She described traveling to different bases, working with international partners, teaching younger soldiers. She kept it general, focusing on the positive aspects. Why did you leave? Margaret finally asked. If you don't mind me asking. Lorraine paused. This was the hard question. But these women had been nothing but kind to her. They deserved something close to the truth. There was an accident during a training exercise, she said carefully. A chemical leak. People were injured. It was traumatic. I developed PTSD. I couldn't continue in that work anymore. Silence filled the room. Then Judy reached over and squeezed her hand. That must have been so difficult, losing a career you loved because of trauma. It was, but I came here and built a new life, a quieter life. And I've been happy. Are you still happy? Eleanor asked gently. Now that your past has been revealed? Lorraine thought about it. Yes, she said, somewhat surprised to realize it was true. I am. It was scary at first, having people know. But everyone has been so kind. And honestly, carrying that secret all these years was exhausting. There's a relief in not having to hide anymore. The women nodded understanding. Margaret spoke up. We've all got parts of our past we're not proud of or that hurt to remember. You're not alone in that, dear. And we're honored that you felt safe enough to build your life here. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Lorraine felt a weight lift. She had been honest, not completely, but as much as she could manage, and it had been okay. Better than okay. Her friendships felt stronger, deeper, more real. Walking home that night, Lorraine reflected on how much had changed in just a few weeks. She had been forced out of hiding, had faced a situation that triggered her deepest trauma, and had come through it. Not unscathed, she'd had several bad nights and anxiety spikes, but intact. She was learning that healing wasn't about forgetting or completely moving past trauma. It was about integrating it, carrying it in a way that didn't crush you. She would always be someone who had experienced a terrible event, November brought cooler weather and shorter days. Lorraine found herself enjoying the change of seasons. She decorated the shop with autumn colors, brought in pumpkins and squash, and offered warm apple cider to customers. Life had found a new rhythm, one that acknowledged her past but wasn't dominated by it. She started sleeping better. The nightmares that had plagued her immediately after the chemical incident gradually faded. She still had moments of anxiety, still sometimes woke feeling panicked, but they were manageable. Her therapist helped her process the experience, validate her feelings, and develop new coping strategies. One evening in late November, as Lorraine was closing the shop, Sheriff Brennan stopped by with unexpected news. The county is creating a new volunteer emergency response advisory board, Tom explained. They want people with various expertise: medical, fire, engineering, chemical. They asked if you'd be willing to serve. It's just a few meetings a year, consulting on emergency preparedness plans. Lorraine's immediate instinct was to refuse, but she caught herself and really considered it. Would this be too much? Would it trigger her PTSD to be involved, even peripherally, in emergency response work? "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course, no pressure." But they specifically said having someone with your background would be invaluable. Just for planning and advice, nothing hands-on. That night, Lorraine thought seriously about the request. Part of her wanted to refuse, to stay safe in the narrow lane she had carved out for herself. But another part, the part that had emerged during the crisis, recognized that her knowledge and experience could help people. She talked it over with her therapist in their next session. "What are your concerns?" Dr. Roberts asked. "That it will trigger my PTSD, that being involved in emergency planning will bring back memories of the accident, that I'll have a panic attack in the middle of a meeting. Those are valid concerns. But let me ask you something. How did you feel after the chemical incident? Once the immediate crisis passed and you had time to process?" Lorraine thought about it. Shaken, exhausted, but also proud, I guess. I did something difficult and important. I used skills I thought I'd lost. Exactly. You faced your fear and discovered you were more capable than you believed. Now you have a chance to use that capability in a controlled, less stressful environment. You would be consulting, not responding, advising, not acting. That's very different from crisis management. So you think I should do it? I think you should do whatever feels right for you. But I want you to make that decision from a place of strength, not fear. Don't refuse because you're afraid. Refuse if it genuinely doesn't serve you. After much consideration, Lorraine called Sheriff Brennan. "Tell the county I'll join the advisory board. I can contribute my knowledge. It's time to stop hiding what I know." Tom sounded pleased. "That's great, Lorraine. They'll be lucky to have you. First meeting is in January. I'll get you the details." As December arrived with its promise of holidays and new beginnings, Lorraine felt she had truly turned a corner. She was no longer running from Captain Baker. She was no longer pretending that 18 years of her life hadn't happened. She was integrating all the pieces of herself into a whole person, someone who had served, who had been traumatized, who had healed, and who had found a new purpose. The shop was busier than ever in December. People shopping for holiday meals kept her occupied and happy. She enjoyed helping customers plan their festive dinners, recommending the best produce, sharing recipe ideas. This was the life she loved, and it didn't diminish because people now knew more about her history. On Christmas Eve, after closing the shop, Lorraine stood at her window looking out at High Meadows Main Street, decorated with lights and garland. Snow was falling gently, coating everything in white. The town looked peaceful, safe, beautiful. She thought about the journey she had taken, from military service to trauma, to running away, to hiding, to finally, tentatively, stepping back into a fuller version of herself. It hadn't been easy. It wasn't over. But she was okay. More than okay. "Thank you," Lorraine whispered to the snowy evening. "Thank you for this town that accepted her. Thank you for the crisis that forced her to face her fears. Thank you for the people who supported her. Thank you for the chance to be whole again." And as Christmas lights twinkled across High Meadow, Lorraine Baker felt something she hadn't felt in many years. Genuine peace with her entire self, past and present, mistakes and triumphs, trauma and healing. She was home. She was whole. She was exactly where she needed to be. January arrived with fresh snow and new possibilities. The first meeting of the county's Emergency Response Advisory Board took place on a cold Tuesday evening at the County Administrative Building. Lorraine drove there with a mixture of nervousness and determination. This was her first official engagement involving emergency management since leaving the military, and she wasn't entirely sure how she would handle it. The conference room was warm and well lit, with about 15 people gathered around a large table. Lorraine recognized a few faces: Dr. Chen from the hazmat team, Fire Chief Rodriguez from a neighboring town, a retired doctor she had met once at a community event. The others were strangers, but they all wore the same expression of professional competence mixed with civic dedication. The County Emergency Services Director, a man named David Marshall, called the meeting to order. He was in his 50s, with the calm demeanor of someone who had managed many crises. "Welcome, everyone. Thank you for volunteering your time and expertise. Our goal with this advisory board is to improve emergency preparedness across the county. We want to learn from recent incidents, update our protocols, and ensure we're ready for whatever comes our way." He introduced each board member, highlighting their areas of expertise. When he got to Lorraine, he said, "Captain Lorraine Baker, retired Army Chemical Corps, who was instrumental in managing the High Meadow chemical incident last September." Lorraine nodded to the room, feeling self-conscious. But the other board members looked at her with respect, not judgment. The meeting focused on reviewing existing emergency response plans and identifying gaps. Lorraine contributed cautiously at first, offering small suggestions based on her experience. But as the discussion progressed, she found herself more engaged. These people were genuinely trying to improve community safety. Her knowledge could help. "One thing I learned from the High Meadow incident," Lorraine said during a discussion about communication protocols, "is that we need better systems for recognizing chemical threats early. Many people noticed symptoms or unusual smells, but didn't realize what they meant. Public education about warning signs could make a big difference." Dr. Chen nodded enthusiastically. "Excellent point. We could develop simple guides for residents and businesses near industrial sites." The discussion expanded from there. Fire Chief Rodriguez mentioned similar issues with fire hazards. The retired doctor talked about medical emergency recognition. They began brainstorming an integrated public awareness campaign. By the end of the 2-hour meeting, Lorraine felt energized rather than drained. This wasn't crisis response. This was planning, education, preparation. It used her knowledge without putting her in situations that triggered trauma. It felt manageable and meaningful. "Same time next month?" David Marshall asked as the meeting concluded. Everyone agreed, and several board members stopped to chat with Lorraine as they gathered their coats. "Your input tonight was really valuable," Dr. Chen told her. "I'm glad you joined the board." Driving home through the dark January night, Lorraine felt satisfied. She had taken on something new and handled it well. Maybe she could do this, contribute her expertise in ways that helped people without sacrificing her own mental health. Back at High Meadow, life continued its pleasant rhythms. The shop did well through the winter, with people buying root vegetables, preserved goods, and fresh produce imported from warmer regions. Lorraine maintained her routines, opening the shop each morning, serving customers, attending book club, spending quiet evenings in her apartment. But there was a subtle difference now. She felt more solid somehow, more integrated. She no longer jumped at every chemical smell or felt panic when sirens went by. She had faced her worst fear and survived it. That accomplishment provided a foundation of confidence she hadn't had before. In February, Lorraine was invited to speak at the county's community preparedness workshop. The invitation came from David Marshall. "We're doing a public education event about emergency preparedness," he explained over the phone. "Various experts will give short presentations. Would you be willing to do 15 minutes on recognizing chemical hazards? Nothing technical, just practical information for ordinary citizens." Lorraine's first instinct was to refuse. Public speaking had never been her favorite activity, even in the military. But she remembered her therapist's advice about making decisions from strength rather than fear. "I'll do it," she said before she could change her mind. She spent weeks preparing her presentation, keeping it simple and accessible. She used examples from the High Meadow incident, showing how ordinary observations could identify potential hazards. She created clear, practical guidelines that anyone could follow. And she practiced until the material felt natural. The workshop was held on a Saturday morning in March at the high school auditorium. About 200 people attended, a good turnout for a county-wide event. Lorraine waited backstage with the other presenters, her stomach churning with nerves. When her turn came, she walked to the podium with outward calm. She looked out at the audience, families, business owners, community members all wanting to know how to keep themselves and their neighbors safe. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "My name is Lorraine Baker. I own Baker's Fresh Produce in High Meadow, and I'm also a retired Army chemical defense specialist. Today I want to talk to you about recognizing chemical hazards in your community." She delivered her presentation smoothly, focusing on the practical information people needed. She explained what unusual chemical odors might indicate, what symptoms suggested exposure, and what to do if they suspected a problem. She showed photos from the High Meadow incident, with permission from the county, demonstrating how a situation could escalate if not addressed quickly. "The key thing to remember," she concluded, "is to trust your instincts. If something smells wrong, if people are getting sick in a pattern, if you notice anything unusual, report it. Don't worry about being wrong or overreacting. It's always better to investigate and find nothing than to ignore a real threat." The applause when she finished was warm and genuine. During the question and answer session, people asked thoughtful questions that she answered thoroughly. Several attendees thanked her personally afterward. "That was really helpful," one woman said. "I work at a school, and now I know what to watch for." "I run a small business near old industrial buildings," a man added. "Your presentation gave me specific things to monitor. Thank you." Driving home that afternoon, Lorraine felt genuinely proud. She had shared knowledge that could help people stay safe. She had turned her traumatic experience into something positive and educational. That felt like real healing. Spring came to High Meadow with its usual burst of color and renewal. The cleared lot where the old factory had stood was beginning its transformation into a park. Workers planted trees and laid out paths. Children would play where chemicals had once been stored. Life replacing danger, it felt symbolic. Lorraine's shop thrived in the spring season. Fresh local produce began appearing again. Early lettuce and radishes, spring onions and tender greens. She loved this time of year, the sense of everything coming back to life. On a warm April afternoon, Tom Brennan stopped by the shop with interesting news. "The State Emergency Management Agency heard about the work you've been doing with the county board and your community education efforts. They're creating a traveling workshop program, chemical safety awareness for rural communities. They want to know if you'd be interested in being a lead presenter." Lorraine set down the tomatoes she had been arranging. This was a much bigger commitment than the advisory board or the one-time workshop presentation. This would mean regular travel, ongoing presentations, a semi-formal role in emergency management. That's quite an opportunity, she said carefully. It is. But it would also be demanding. They're talking about 1 or 2 presentations per month around the state. You'd be compensated, of course. It would be a significant part-time position. Lorraine felt the familiar tug of war inside herself. Part of her wanted to maintain her quiet life, stay safely in her comfortable routine. But another part, the part that had been growing stronger since the chemical incident, recognized this as a chance to make a real difference. Can I think about it? Of course. They need an answer by the end of the month. That evening, Lorraine sat in her apartment thinking about the offer. She made a list of pros and cons, trying to be rational and honest with herself. Pros: meaningful work, using her expertise to help people, good compensation, opportunity to prevent emergencies rather than just responding to them, professional engagement that could be fulfilling. Cons: travel and disruption to her routine, potential PTSD triggers, less time for the shop and her life in High Meadow, pressure and responsibility, putting herself in the public eye more. She called Dr. Roberts and discussed it during an emergency phone session. "What does your gut tell you?" the therapist asked. "My gut is confused," Lorraine admitted. "Part of me is excited. Part of me is terrified. Part of me thinks I'd be good at this. Part of me thinks I'd fall apart under the pressure." "You've come a long way, Lorraine. A year ago, even considering this would have been impossible. Now you're seriously thinking about it. What's changed?" Lorraine thought about it. "I proved to myself that I can handle my skills being activated without completely breaking down. I learned that my trauma doesn't have to define me. I discovered that sharing my knowledge feels good." Those are significant realizations. So the question is, would this role serve your continued growth, or would it compromise your stability? That was the key question, wasn't it? Lorraine spent days considering it. She talked to trusted friends. She meditated. She journaled. She paid attention to her body's responses when she imagined saying yes versus saying no. Finally, she called David Marshall at the County Emergency Services Office. "David, I've thought about the state's offer. I'm going to say yes, but with some conditions. I'm listening. I want to start gradually. Maybe 1 presentation the first month, then build up if I'm handling it well. I need to be able to step back if my mental health requires it. No guilt, no penalty. And I want to maintain ownership of my shop and my home base here in High Meadow. This would be supplemental work, not a full career change." "Those conditions seem very reasonable. I'll communicate them to the state agency. I think they'll agree." They did agree. By May, Lorraine was officially a part-time chemical safety educator for the State Emergency Management Agency. Her first workshop was scheduled for June in a small town 2 hours away, far enough to feel like she was doing something new, close enough that she could return home the same day. She prepared thoroughly, expanding her earlier presentation into a more comprehensive workshop. She practiced until she could deliver it smoothly. And she developed strategies for managing her anxiety, breathing exercises, grounding techniques, a plan for stepping away if she needed a break. The night before her first official workshop, Lorraine had trouble sleeping. Anxiety and excitement churned together in her stomach. She got up and made chamomile tea, sitting by her window and looking out at the sleeping town. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "You've already done the hard part. This is just sharing what you know, helping people. That's all." The workshop the next day went wonderfully. About 30 people attended: farmers, small business owners, school staff, local officials. Lorraine delivered her material with confidence, answered questions thoroughly, and felt genuine satisfaction when participants thanked her for valuable information. "This is exactly what our community needed," the local fire chief told her. "We had no idea what to watch for. Now we're much better prepared." Driving home that evening, Lorraine felt tired but happy. She had done it. She had used her skills in a healthy way. She had helped people without sacrificing her own well-being. It was possible to be both Lorraine the shop owner and Lorraine the chemical safety expert. She didn't have to choose one identity over the other. Over the following months, Lorraine gradually increased her workshop schedule. Some months, she did only one presentation. Other months, she did 3 or 4. She learned to balance the work with running her shop, relying on part-time help from a local teenager who needed employment. She also learned that she was good at this work. Really good. Her presentations were clear, engaging, and practical. People responded well to her combination of expertise and approachability. She wasn't a distant expert talking down to them. She was someone who understood small-town life and spoke their language while also having serious professional knowledge to share. By autumn, a full year after the High Meadow chemical incident, Lorraine felt she had achieved something remarkable. She had transformed trauma into purpose. She had integrated her past and present into a meaningful whole. She had built a life that honored both who she had been and who she had become. She was still Lorraine Baker, shop owner, who sold vegetables and belonged to the book club and knew everyone in High Meadow. But she was also Lorraine Baker, chemical safety educator, who traveled around the state helping communities prepare for emergencies. Both identities were real. Both were valuable. And together, they made her feel complete in a way she hadn't felt in years. Standing in her shop one September morning, exactly 1 year after the crisis that changed everything, Lorraine looked around at the familiar surroundings with deep appreciation. She had been given a gift, the challenge that forced her to face her fears, the community that supported her through it, and the opportunity to turn pain into purpose. Life wasn't perfect. She still had bad days. She still occasionally woke from nightmares. She still felt anxiety when certain situations arose. But she had learned to manage these challenges without letting them control her life. She had learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about integrating it in healthy ways. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 2 years after the chemical incident that had changed everything, High Meadow looked much the same as it always had. Main Street still bustled with familiar faces. The seasons still cycled through their predictable patterns. Life maintained its comfortable small-town rhythms. But Lorraine Baker had changed, profoundly and permanently. On a crisp October morning, she stood at the site of the former chemical factory, now a beautiful small park called Meadow Green. Trees planted 2 years ago had grown substantially. Walking paths wound through grass and flower beds. A children's playground occupied one corner, filled with laughing kids on swings and slides. Benches provided places for residents to sit and enjoy the autumn sunshine. Lorraine sat on one of these benches, watching the children play. It was hard to believe that this peaceful space had once been the source of such danger. The transformation felt metaphorical, from threat to beauty, from danger to life, from fear to joy. "Mind if I join you?" Sheriff Brennan's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Of course not, Tom. Please, sit." Tom settled onto the bench with a slight groan. "Getting older. These bones don't like the cold weather as much as they used to." "I know the feeling," Lorraine said with a smile. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the park activity. Then Tom spoke. "You know, I've been thinking about how much has happened since that day you called me about the chemical smell. 2 years. feels longer somehow. It does, Lorraine agreed. So much has changed. You've changed, in good ways. You seem, I don't know, more settled, more yourself. Lorraine considered his observation. He was right. She did feel more herself, not the frightened person hiding from her past, and not the traumatized veteran unable to move forward, but someone who had integrated all her experiences into a coherent whole. I had to stop running, she said. The crisis forced me to face what I'd been avoiding, and I discovered that confronting my fears didn't destroy me. It actually made me stronger. That's profound. Or maybe just obvious, Lorraine said with a laugh. Sometimes we have to learn the hard way. Tom's radio crackled with routine traffic. He listened briefly, then turned it down. The state emergency management folks called me last week. They're nominating you for some kind of service award. Did you know? Lorraine shook her head. No. For what? Your chemical safety education program. Apparently, it's been incredibly successful. You've trained responders in over 30 communities. The state director said your workshops are the most highly rated program they offer. Lorraine felt herself blush. I'm just sharing information. It's not that special. Don't downplay it. You're making a real difference. Communities are better prepared because of your work. That's significant. After Tom left to continue his patrol, Lorraine remained on the bench, thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been terrified, anxious, struggling to maintain the fiction that her past didn't matter. Now she was confident, purposeful, using her history to serve others. The transformation hadn't been smooth or easy. There had been setbacks, presentations that triggered anxiety attacks, nights when nightmares returned with vengeance, moments when she questioned whether she was doing the right thing. But she had persisted, supported by her therapist, her friends, and her own growing resilience. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Judy at the library. Book club tonight, 7 p.m. We're discussing Educated by Tara Westover. See you there. Lorraine smiled. Some things remained wonderfully constant. The book club still met monthly, still provided her with intellectual stimulation and friendship. She still ran her shop, still served her customers with care and attention. The foundation of her life in High Meadow remained solid, but now she had added new dimensions. The Emergency Response Advisory Board met quarterly, and she was an active, valued member. Her chemical safety workshops took her around the state twice a month on average. She had become a resource person for other communities facing industrial hazard issues. And she had even been invited to consult on a national emergency preparedness curriculum. The work was challenging but fulfilling. She had learned to manage the stress, to recognize her limits, to take breaks when needed. She had developed a network of professional colleagues who understood and respected her expertise. And she had discovered that teaching and educating could be just as satisfying as operational work had been in her military days. Maybe more so, because it prevented emergencies rather than responding to them. That evening at book club, the discussion was lively. Educated told the story of a woman escaping her isolated upbringing to build a new life through education and self-determination. The themes resonated with all the women, but especially with Lorraine. It's about becoming who you're meant to be, Margaret Henderson observed. About not letting your past dictate your future. But also about integrating your past, Eleanor Crawford added. Tara doesn't completely reject where she came from. She incorporates it into her understanding of herself. Lorraine nodded thoughtfully. That's the challenge, isn't it? Not running from your history, but not being trapped by it either. Finding a way to honor where you've been while moving forward. Speaking from experience? Judy asked gently. Always, Lorraine said with a smile. I spent a long time trying to be someone I wasn't, pretending my military service never happened. It didn't work. Real peace came from accepting all of it, the good parts and the traumatic parts. The women nodded, understanding. They had watched Lorraine's journey over the past 2 years, had seen her struggle and grow. Their support had been invaluable, though often unspoken. Walking home after the meeting, Lorraine detoured past her shop. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, turning on just enough lights to see. The familiar space welcomed her, produce displays arranged just so, shelves stocked with care, the faint scent of fresh herbs and fruit. This place represented her present, her chosen identity, her peace. But it no longer represented an escape from her past. It was simply another part of who she was: shop owner, community member, friend. Captain Baker existed alongside these identities rather than in opposition to them. All the pieces fit together now. Lorraine locked up and climbed the stairs to her apartment. As she prepared for bed, she thought about the award Tom had mentioned. Recognition was nice, but it wasn't why she did the work. She did it because knowledge that could save lives shouldn't be hoarded out of fear. She did it because her trauma had taught her something valuable, and sharing that lesson gave meaning to her pain. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Sarah Chen from the hazmat team stopped by the shop during Lorraine's morning rush. "Lorraine, do you have a minute? I'd like to talk to you about something." They stepped into the office, where Lorraine poured them both coffee. "What's on your mind?" "The State Emergency Management Agency is creating a new position, Director of Chemical Safety Education. It would involve coordinating all the chemical preparedness programs statewide, training new educators, developing curriculum, working with various agencies. It's a serious full-time position with excellent benefits." Lorraine felt her heart skip. "And they want me for this position?" "They do. You've proven yourself over the past 2 years. Your workshops are phenomenal. Your knowledge is exactly what the program needs. This would be a significant opportunity. But it would mean giving up my shop, leaving High Meadow, becoming a full-time state employee." "Yes," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "Those are real considerations. But it would also mean reaching far more people, having greater impact, using your skills at a higher level. Just something to think about." After Dr. Chen left, Lorraine stood in her shop feeling genuinely conflicted. 2 years ago, such an offer would have been unthinkable. She would have rejected it immediately, too frightened to even consider leaving her safe haven. Now she found herself seriously thinking about it. That evening, she made 2 phone calls. First to her therapist. "Dr. Roberts, I need to talk through a major decision." She explained the job offer and her confusion about how to respond. Dr. Roberts listened carefully. 2 years ago, when you joined the advisory board, you had conditions: gradual involvement, ability to step back, maintaining your home base. Those conditions were appropriate for where you were in your healing. Where are you now? Lorraine thought about it. "I'm stronger, more confident. I've proven I can handle the work without falling apart." So the question becomes not, can I do this, but do I want to? That's very different. Her second call was to Margaret Henderson, who had become her closest friend in High Meadow. "Margaret, can I ask your advice about something?" She explained the situation. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "Lorraine, what does your heart tell you?" "That's the problem. My heart is divided. Part of me loves the life I have here. Part of me is excited by this new opportunity. I don't know how to choose." "Then maybe you need to ask yourself, which choice will you regret? Not taking the job and wondering what might have been, or taking it and missing High Meadow? Which unknown feels more uncomfortable?" That was the right question. Lorraine realized immediately which regret would weigh heavier. She loved High Meadow and would always be grateful for the sanctuary it had provided. But if she turned down this opportunity, she would always wonder if fear had held her back from her full potential. Thank you, Margaret. I think I know what I need to do. Over the next week, Lorraine made her decision. She would accept the position, but with conditions. She would keep ownership of her shop, hiring a manager to run it. She would maintain her apartment in High Meadow and come back whenever possible. She wouldn't be leaving her sanctuary. She would be expanding from it. When she called the state emergency management director to accept, his enthusiasm was immediate. That's wonderful news. We're lucky to have you. When can you start? January 1st, Lorraine said. That gives me time to hire someone to manage my shop and prepare for the transition. And I have one condition. I want to maintain my residence in High Meadow. I'll work from the state office during the week, but I come home on weekends. Absolutely, we can make that work. Welcome aboard, Director Baker. Director Baker. The title felt strange, but also right. She was stepping into official leadership, acknowledging her expertise, accepting responsibility at a level she hadn't held since leaving the military. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure. The news spread quickly through High Meadow. Reactions were mixed. People were proud of her advancement, but sad to lose their full-time shop owner. Lorraine assured everyone that she wasn't really leaving, just expanding her reach. You'll still see me every weekend, she told Margaret. I'll still be at book club. I'm not abandoning High Meadow. This town saved my life. I'll always call it home. We know, dear. We're just proud of you. Look how far you've come. In December, as Lorraine prepared for her new position, she spent time reflecting on her journey. From Captain Baker, confident and competent, to the traumatized veteran fleeing her past, to Lorraine, the shop owner hiding in a small town, to this new version of herself, integrated, purposeful, strong. It had been a long road with many painful steps. She thought about that terrible day during the training exercise that had changed everything. For years, she had viewed it only as trauma, as the thing that broke her. But now she could see it differently. Yes, it had been traumatic. Yes, it had caused immense suffering. But it had also taught her things about resilience, vulnerability, and human limitation that she might never have learned otherwise. The trauma didn't define her. Her response to it did. And her response had ultimately been to heal, to grow, to transform pain into purpose. That was worth something. On her last day running the shop full-time, Lorraine felt bittersweet. She had hired a wonderful woman named Patricia to manage it, someone with retail experience who loved the community and would take good care of the business. Lorraine would still own it, still be involved, but Patricia would handle the day-to-day operations. Customers came in all day to wish her well. Many brought small gifts or cards. Some were tearful, though she assured them repeatedly that she would be back every weekend. You're going to do amazing things, Tom Brennan told her. High Meadow gave you a place to heal. Now you're taking that healing out into the world. That's beautiful. That evening, Lorraine stood at her apartment window one last time as the primary resident of High Meadow. Starting Monday, she would commute to the state capital, spending weekdays in a small apartment there and returning home on weekends. It was a big change, but it felt right. She thought about everything this town had given her. A place to hide when she needed it. Time to heal without pressure. A community that accepted her without question. Friendships that sustained her. The space to slowly become whole again. High Meadow had been exactly what she needed exactly when she needed it. And now it was time to take what she had learned here and share it more broadly. She had knowledge and experience that could help people. She had overcome trauma in ways that might inspire others facing their own struggles. She had a purpose that extended beyond herself. Thank you, Lorraine whispered to the town sleeping below her window, for everything. In January, Director Lorraine Baker reported to her new office at the State Emergency Management Agency. It felt strange to be back in an official capacity, to have business cards with a title, to attend meetings with government officials. But it also felt like coming full circle. She wasn't Captain Baker anymore. That young woman with something to prove had evolved into someone wiser and more grounded. But she also wasn't hiding from that identity anymore. She was Lorraine Baker, Director of Chemical Safety Education, who had served her country for 18 years, experienced trauma, spent a decade healing in a small town, and emerged ready to serve again in a new way. Her first major project was developing a comprehensive chemical safety curriculum for rural communities. She drew on her military training, her personal experience with the High Meadow incident, and everything she had learned through 2 years of workshop presentations. The result was a program that was both technically sound and accessible to ordinary people. She also began training a new generation of chemical safety educators, teaching them not just the technical aspects, but also the human dimensions: how to communicate complex information clearly, how to address fear without causing panic, how to empower communities to protect themselves. "You're really good at this," one of her trainees told her after a particularly effective training session. "You make complicated stuff understandable. How did you learn to do that?" Lorraine thought about it. "I learned by remembering what it's like to be afraid and confused. I learned by spending years away from this work, seeing it from an outsider's perspective. I learned that expertise means nothing if you can't communicate it in ways people can use." Every Friday afternoon, Lorraine made the drive back to High Meadow. As her car crested the hill and the valley came into view, she always felt her shoulders relax. This was home. This would always be home, no matter where her work took her. She would stop at the shop to check in with Patricia and help with any issues. She would have dinner with friends. She would attend Saturday's farmers market and Sunday's book club meetings. She maintained her connections, her relationships, her roots. These weren't obligations. They were joys, the foundation that made everything else possible. On one such weekend visit, Lorraine found herself back at Meadow Green Park, sitting on the same bench where she had talked with Tom Brennan months earlier. Children played on the equipment. Families picnicked on the grass. Life continued in all its ordinary beauty. A young woman sat down on the other end of the bench, watching 2 small children play. After a moment, she glanced at Lorraine. "You're Lorraine Baker, aren't you? The chemical safety director?" "Yes, that's me. I attended one of your workshops last year. It was really helpful. My brother works at an industrial facility, and he used what you taught us to identify a small leak before it became serious. You probably saved a lot of people." Lorraine felt warmth spread through her chest. "I'm so glad the information was useful. That's exactly why I do this work." "Can I ask you something? How did you get into this field? It's kind of unusual for a woman, especially in a small town." Lorraine considered how to answer. She could give the simple version: former military, saw a need, stepped up. But she decided to be more honest. "I spent many years running away from my expertise because it was associated with trauma. But eventually I learned that hiding from your knowledge doesn't heal you. Using it to help others does." The young woman nodded thoughtfully. "That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that." After the woman collected her children and left, Lorraine sat alone in the peaceful park, thinking about how far she had come. From the terrified veteran who couldn't look at her old uniform to the confident educator who spoke at state conferences. From the broken person hiding from her past to the integrated person using all her experiences to serve others. The journey wasn't over. She still had hard days. She still sometimes woke from nightmares. She still felt anxiety in certain situations, but she had learned to manage these challenges without letting them control her life. She had learned that healing wasn't about erasing trauma, but about transforming it into wisdom. As the sun began to set over High Meadow, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lorraine stood and walked back toward her shop. She would check on a few things, have dinner with Margaret, and spend a quiet evening in her apartment. Tomorrow she would return to the state capital and her important work there. But tonight, she was home. And that was the beautiful truth she had learned. Home wasn't just a place. It was a state of being. It was the peace you found within yourself, the integration of past and present, the acceptance of all you had been and all you were becoming. She carried High Meadow with her wherever she went, just as she now carried Captain Baker not as a burden, but as a source of strength. Lorraine Baker had traveled a long road from trauma to healing, from hiding to purpose, from fear to courage. She had been broken and had reassembled herself into something stronger than before. She had learned that second chances weren't about starting over. They were about incorporating everything you had learned and becoming more fully yourself. As she unlocked her shop and stepped inside, Lorraine smiled at the familiar space. This had been her sanctuary, her healing place, her home. And it still was. But now it was also a launching point, a foundation from which she could reach out and make a difference in the wider world. She was no longer running from her past. She was building on it. And that made all the difference. 5 years after the chemical incident that changed everything, Lorraine Baker stood at a podium in the state capitol, addressing an audience of emergency management professionals from across the country. At 72 years old, she had more energy and purpose than she'd had in decades. Chemical safety isn't just about technical knowledge, she told the assembled professionals. It's about empowering communities to recognize and respond to threats. It's about turning fear into awareness and awareness into action. She had been invited to speak at the National Emergency Preparedness Conference, a prestigious event that drew experts from around the nation. Her chemical safety education program had become a model that other states were adopting. Her workshops had reached over 100 communities. Her curriculum was being used in emergency management training programs nationwide. But the statistics weren't what made Lorraine proud. What mattered was the letters she received from small-town residents who said her training had helped them identify hazards. The emails from first responders who felt more confident handling chemical incidents because of her education programs. The knowledge that somewhere, someone was safer because of work she had done. After her presentation, several attendees approached with questions. One was a young woman, maybe 30 years old, who introduced herself as a chemical engineer recently hired by a state emergency management agency. Ms. Baker, I just want to thank you. I heard you speak 3 years ago when I was still in graduate school. You inspired me to focus my career on public safety rather than private industry. You showed me that expertise means nothing if you don't use it to help people. Lorraine felt tears prick her eyes. This was legacy. Not just the programs she had built, but the people she had inspired to carry the work forward. Thank you for telling me that, Lorraine said warmly. And thank you for your service. We need more people like you. That evening, Lorraine returned to her hotel room and called Margaret Henderson in High Meadow. They spoke regularly, maintaining their friendship despite the geographic distance. How was the conference? Margaret asked. Wonderful, overwhelming in good ways, but I'm tired and ready to come home. When will you be back? Friday afternoon. And Margaret, I've been thinking. I'm ready to slow down a bit. I've trained excellent people to take over the education programs. Maybe it's time for me to officially retire, again, and spend more time in High Meadow. Really? Oh, Lorraine, we would love to have you back full-time. though I hope you'll still do occasional workshops. You're so good at it. Of course, I'll never completely stop, but I can be selective, take on special projects, mentor others. I've built something good. Now I can trust it to continue without me running it. After the call ended, Lorraine sat by her hotel window, looking out at the city lights. She had accomplished more than she ever imagined possible 5 years ago. She had turned personal trauma into professional purpose. She had helped countless people and communities. She had proven that healing was possible, that second chances were real, that reinvention at any age was achievable. But now she felt ready to return to the simple pleasures that had started her healing journey. Running her shop, serving customers, attending book club meetings, being part of High Meadow's daily life. She had made her contribution to the wider world. Now she could return to the community that had saved her and give back in simpler, more immediate ways. Friday afternoon found Lorraine driving back to High Meadow, the familiar route bringing its usual sense of peace. As she crested the hill and saw the valley below, she felt profound gratitude. This place had been her sanctuary when she needed to hide. It had remained her home while she ventured out to serve others. And now it would be her permanent residence again as she moved into the next phase of her life. She stopped at the shop, where Patricia had everything running smoothly. "Welcome back. Are you ready for Monday?" Monday would be Lorraine's first day back as full-time shop owner. Patricia would stay on part-time, but the primary responsibility would shift back to Lorraine. They had planned this transition carefully, ensuring continuity for customers while allowing Lorraine to resume her original role. "I'm ready," Lorraine confirmed. "And thank you, Patricia. You've done an excellent job. The shop has thrived under your management." That evening, the book club held a special welcome home gathering for Lorraine. They met at Margaret's house instead of the library, with wine and snacks and the kind of warm fellowship that sustained deep friendships. "To Lorraine," Judy toasted, "who went out into the world, made a huge difference, and is now coming back to us. Welcome home." They clinked glasses and spent the evening catching up on local news and each other's lives. It felt like coming home in the truest sense, returning to people who knew you, accepted you, and celebrated all versions of yourself. The next morning, Lorraine walked through High Meadow, reacquainting herself with daily life as a full-time resident. She stopped at Meadow Green Park, now mature and beautiful, a testament to transformation. The trees had grown tall, flowers bloomed in established gardens, children played on equipment that had been updated and expanded. Life had completely replaced danger. She sat on her favorite bench and pulled out her journal. She had been keeping one for years, writing through her thoughts and feelings as part of her ongoing healing process. Today she wrote, "I am 72 years old. I am retired, truly retired now, from professional service. I am back home in High Meadow, where my healing began. I have come full circle, but I am not the same person who arrived here frightened and broken 15 years ago. I have learned that trauma doesn't have to define you. I have learned that healing is possible at any age. I have learned that purpose can emerge from pain. I have learned that second chances are real. I spent 18 years as Captain Baker in the Army. I spent 10 years hiding from that identity in High Meadow. I spent 5 years as Director Baker, using my expertise to serve communities across the state. Now I am simply Lorraine Baker, shop owner, friend, community member, and someone who has integrated all those identities into one whole person. This is what healing looks like. Not forgetting the past, but making peace with it. Not erasing trauma, but transforming it into wisdom. Not hiding who you were, but building on it to become who you're meant to be. I am home. I am whole. I am at peace. And I am grateful. Lorraine closed her journal and looked around at the park filled with playing children, at the town spread out below, at the gentle hills surrounding the valley. This place had given her everything she needed when she needed it: sanctuary, time, community, acceptance, and eventually the courage to step back into purpose. Now she would spend her remaining years giving back to High Meadow in simple, daily ways: serving customers in her shop, supporting friends through life's challenges, contributing her knowledge when needed, but not carrying the weight of official responsibility, living the quiet, meaningful life she had originally sought when she first arrived, but now with full acceptance of all the parts of herself. As she walked back toward her shop, several people greeted her warmly. Tom Brennan waved from his patrol car. The librarian called out a hello from the library steps. Young people she barely knew smiled at her. They had grown up hearing stories of the chemical incident, the mysterious shop owner who turned out to be a hero, the woman who had helped so many communities stay safe. Lorraine returned their greetings, feeling part of something larger than herself: community, legacy, purpose, love. These were the things that mattered, the things that lasted, the things that made life meaningful. She unlocked her shop and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar scents of fresh produce and herbs. This Monday, she would officially return to running the shop full-time. She would serve customers, order produce, keep the shelves stocked, and engage in the simple transactions that built community one interaction at a time. It wasn't glamorous work. It wouldn't make headlines or win awards. But it was good work, honest work, work that connected her to people in real and immediate ways. And after years of larger responsibilities, the simplicity of it felt like a gift. As Lorraine prepared to close up for the evening, she paused to look around at her shop one more time. This space represented so much: her healing, her purpose, her chosen identity, her home. It had been her sanctuary when she was broken. It would be her workshop now that she was whole. She turned off the lights, locked the door, and climbed the stairs to her apartment. Tomorrow would be Sunday. Church if she felt like it. Definitely book club in the evening, and quiet hours to rest and prepare for Monday's reopening. Lorraine made herself a simple dinner and settled into her favorite chair with a new novel. Outside her window, High Meadow settled into its evening routines. Lights came on in homes. Families gathered for dinner. The world continued its gentle turning. And Lorraine Baker, 72 years old, retired Army captain and retired state director, current shop owner and permanent resident of High Meadow, felt completely and utterly at peace. She had traveled a long, hard road from trauma to healing, from hiding to purpose, from fear to courage. She had learned that you could be broken and become whole again, that past and present could be integrated, that second chances were real. She was home. She was whole. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And that was everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.